story opens in a movie theater where the audience laughs at a film. Meanwhile, Paul, wearing a small light on his head, sits in a chair in the projector room, reading a book and eating an apple. After a while, Paul exits the room and heads to meet a girl. The girl asks Paul about the movie, and he replies, "You know how it goes with Adam Sandler. He gets into a mess, his wife gets upset, and the cycle repeats. Same old lame jokes. You wouldn't like it." The girl, curious, asks how he knows what she likes. Paul responds, "I don't know what you like." The girl teases, "Maybe you should find out sometime." Paul heads back to the projector room where the lights suddenly go out. Annoyed, he exclaims, "What the hell?" He walks into another room, calling out, "Kim?" Just as the light turns back on, he notices something strange. Everyone is gone, but their clothes and shoes are scattered across the floor. Confused and alarmed, Paul exits and finds a man on the rooftop. The man asks what happened, but Paul is just as clueless. As they walk, the lights flicker off again. The man jokes, "We're being punked, right?" Paul replies, "Yeah, Alan Funt is about to pop up any minute." The man then stops and tells Paul to wait while he checks something. As Paul's light flickers and goes out, he taps it and looks around. But the man has disappeared, leaving only his clothes behind. Elsewhere, Rosemary walks through an empty hospital holding a light stick. She cries out for help, but no one answers. Hearing a sound, she enters a room where the light is still on and finds an old man lying on the bed drenched in blood. Frightened, she drops her light. When she picks it up, the old man is gone. Rosemary breaks down, calling for Manny, her baby. Meanwhile, Luke wakes up to the bright sunlight in his room. He shuts off his candles and calls out for Paige, his girlfriend, but gets no response. After searching the bathroom, he calls for her again, but there's no answer. Frustrated, Luke heads to the living room and finds a wine bottle on the floor. He grabs a newspaper and leaves his apartment. As he walks down the street, he steps on broken glass, dropping the newspaper. He sees an eerie sight, empty cars and scattered clothes. Suddenly, a plane crashes nearby, sending him running. At his office, Luke checks for signs of life but finds none. He calls out, "Anybody here?" But no one responds. He opens a drawer, pulls out a walkie-talkie, but it's out of battery. As he stares at a photo, he hears a noise and rushes to investigate. 72 hours later, Luke is running through the streets carrying a light. He tries several cars, but they're all broken. Exhausted, he rests his head on a car hood. A man approaches, knocking on the window, asking for Luke's light because his own is running out. Luke ignores him, and the man hops on a bicycle and rides away. As Luke continues his search, he hears a scream and runs outside. He finds the man's clothes, but the man is gone. As Luke approaches another car, he's startled by a little girl watching him from a distance. She's scared, seeing strange shadows moving around. Luke hears disembodied voices calling, "Little boy, don't you know me? I'm the one who brought you from Tennessee." Luke enters a bar, his gun in hand, but the place is empty. He grabs a bottle of wine and drinks, watching the lights flicker. The light stays on longer than expected. Luke spots a basement door and heads down, finding a working generator and a light. But just as he's about to leave, a man named James points a gun at him and tells him to drop his weapon and light. Luke does so, and James asks, "Now what?" Luke slowly exits the room, with James following closely behind. Luke suggests James lower the barrel of the gun a little so they can talk. He offers James a drink, but as Luke reaches for it, James shoots at the bottle, making Luke jump. Luke yells at him, saying, "God damn it, shoot me if you're afraid." James insists he's not afraid, but Luke counters, "You're afraid." He presses James, "Shoot me because nobody's here." Luke asks James his name, and James reluctantly tells him. Luke jokes, "Like Jesse James, huh?" and shares his name too. James reveals he's seen Luke on TV. Luke explains that he's a reporter for News 7. James, surprised, says he's always seen Luke shouting into a microphone. Luke, glad to meet someone else, suggests they have a drink together. He asks James where he found the gun, and James answers, "It's my mom's. She keeps it under the bar." Luke asks if James's mom owns the bar, but James corrects him. She's just the bartender. James reveals that his mom went up the street to check on the lights in the church. Luke is curious and asks how long ago the man came by saying he saw a light in the church. James answers, "He's gone." Luke asks how much gas James has left in the generator, but James doesn't know. He says his mom told him to keep feeding it every few hours. Luke hands James his light and batteries, telling him, "You're going to help us both get out of here." James insists he's not going anywhere and wants to wait for his mom. But Luke argues there's no one else left. It's 11 a.m., yet it's completely dark outside. He says the sun is coming up later and setting earlier each day. People have been disappearing, and Luke can't wait around to find out why. He's determined to leave the city. Just as he's about to go, Rosemary bursts in, searching for her baby. She pulls out a gun and fires, crying out in despair. James and Rosemary introduced themselves to each other. As they spoke, Rosemary was struck by a haunting flashback. She recalled a time when she was outside smoking a cigarette. As she lit her lighter, the light suddenly went out and she hurried back inside, but no one was there. Her mind drifted to the idea that Manny's father might have been involved, which is why she thought he had taken her baby. Suddenly, a loud scream cut through the silence. Luke rushed to investigate and found Paul lying on a bench with a head injury. Luke quickly turned on his light and helped Paul to the bar. Rosemary checked on Paul, asking for his name, and Paul weakly answered. Luke asked how Paul had found the light. Paul explained that he was working at the Fairlane Center when suddenly everyone disappeared. His light began to die and then someone hit him. He was taken somewhere, and when his light came back on, he found himself outside, not knowing how he got there. He walked until he found shelter. Paul described hearing only whispers and seeing shadows. He screamed and fought against the air, but it was all in vain. Luke said it felt like a dream, but Paul disagreed, saying dreams were more broken, more obscure. Luke asked if he had seen the man who hit him, but Paul explained that it wasn't a person, it was something else, and everything disappeared around him. Rosemary asked why they were left behind, and Paul replied cryptically, "We are the last spin on the reel before it stops for good." Rosemary, feeling burdened by guilt, confided that she had done awful things in her life, hurt people and made mistakes, just like everyone else. Luke, confused, asked if she was saying this was punishment for her actions. Rosemary responded, "It's between you and God." Tension rose between them, and suddenly the light flickered and went out. They all heard strange sounds. The three of them hurried to the generator room to turn the light back on. Paul suddenly spoke about an island off the coast of the Carolinas called Roanoke. In 1587, it was the site of the first English colony, where 117 men, women, and children lived. One day, a boat arrived from London with supplies, but the entire colony was gone. The only clue left behind was a single word scratched into a fence post, Croatoan. Paul suggested that this was a warning, though he couldn't be sure. Suddenly, Paul collapsed and Luke and Rosemary rushed to lay him on a table. Rosemary asked for ice, but when Luke went to find some, he had a flashback. He remembered walking into the broadcast room, seeing the news, and suddenly the light went out. Shadows began to call his name, and he ran, desperate to reach the light. When the flashback ended, Luke returned to the group and urgently told them that they had to leave. He believed this was a trap. When the light dies, they die. Luke said there was a truck 5 or 8 blocks away, and if they could get it started, they might have a chance of escaping. He added that he could take Paul to a hospital in Chicago. He revealed that the morning after it all began, he had caught a satellite feed showing that there were survivors like them. He couldn't wait any longer and was going to look for the truck, but just as he was about to leave, the light flickered again, sending a wave of fear through them all. "We can't wait here anymore," Luke said, and the group reluctantly agreed to leave. Luke and Rosemary ventured outside, leaving James and Paul behind. They reached the car and started pushing it. As they did, Paul spoke to James, reminiscing about a time in 1964 when Catherine Deneuve's music and colors would have made her love it. Paul suddenly fell asleep, and James had to wake him up. Paul asked James to put on a song, and Paul sang along as James thought back to a time when he was at a bar, surrounded by people. He was happy, meeting everyone, and heading straight to his mom, who worked there. Luke stopped pushing the car when his ankle started to hurt. James went to get some water, but just as he did, the light turned off. Paul called for him, but there was no answer. Luke and Rosemary sat in the car, and Luke shared with her that all the lights were now dead. He asked Rosemary about her son, and she explained that her son only made sounds. Luke opened up about his own life. He shared that his wife, Anna, lived in Chicago, and they were separated. He left for his career, and she stayed for hers. Suddenly, Rosemary spotted a little girl from afar and called out to her. The girl ran away, and Luke followed, but he fell. Rosemary quickly hit the lights to save him. Paul went to the bathroom to check on James, but was disappointed to find him missing. Luke and Rosemary, still in the car, heard no response from James, and Paul continued to search for him. Eventually, Paul stumbled across a room full of lights. He followed the lights and called out for James, but as he reached a wall, a shadow appeared, and he collapsed on the ground, saying, "I exist." The lights then turned off completely. A single light flickered back on, and James stepped out of the bathroom calling for Paul, but he couldn't find him. Meanwhile, Rosemary and Luke wandered to another location where they lit a fire. Rosemary went to find rubbing alcohol to use as fuel. At the bar, the lights began to flicker again. As Rosemary searched for alcohol, she heard Manny's voice. She rushed to find him, but as she dropped the light, she disappeared. Luke went outside, while James, now with the generator, heard the sounds of Luke's return. The two embraced, and Luke asked James about Paul, but James sadly replied that Paul was gone. James, distraught, asked about Rosemary. Luke reassured him that they would make it through this. Together, they tried to power the generator using a car battery, but it failed. They decided to leave in the car. As they drove, James saw a church in the distance and insisted on going to look for his mom. Luke, calling out to him, urged him to return, but James ignored him. When Luke's car light turned off, he vanished. James sat down between candles, whispering to himself that he existed. The next day, the sun rose, and James woke up. A little girl appeared and told him not to leave. She introduced herself as Brianna, and James shared his name. They walked out of the church and saw a horse eating apples. Together, they left the church behind, riding into the unknown. When night fell, they reached the outskirts, traveling on the road out of Detroit. Their journey was far from over, but they had each other now, even as the world around them continued to vanish. And I don't want your entertainment to vanish, my friend. So I prepared a nice batch of great stories for you to binge. Just click on the recommendations on the right. Subscribe for future uploads, and as always, grab your popcorn, enjoy yourself, and see you soon, my friend.